Welcome to The Digital Footprint, a podcast for leaders in healthcare, public health, and education who are looking to leverage technology to solve problems and make a big impact. In each episode, we interview innovators and entrepreneurs who are solving the most challenging problems facing these industries. Join us as we dig into the colossal tasks involved in bringing a new digital product to life. Welcome to The Digital Footprint. Digital Footprint.
Hello and welcome to The Digital Footprint, presented by Tyrannosaurus Tech, an award-winning technology partner dedicated to helping you create high-impact software products. I'm your host, Richard Simms. With me is my co-founder and co-host, Carlos Gonzalez.
Hello.
All right, so today we are exploring the business side of branding with two of the nation's leading experts. They're here to help us stay ahead of the curve on the future of branding, including where organizations need to invest in 2024 and beyond. And we're also talking about how service-based businesses can navigate the ever-changing AI frontier and hopefully leverage that for growth and scale. So we're excited to get into it. Yeah.
What's inspiring about our guests today is their incredible journey. They've not only scaled a creative firm, but also kept their partnership strong over 2 decades. Later, we'll dive into their strategies and get some advice. Listeners, you will want to stick around.
Absolutely.
Let's bring them on.
Okay, awesome. So they are the owners and co-founders of Matchstic, the premier brand identity firm in the South, leading more than 200 projects and brand launches from an impressive roster, Chick-fil-A, Publix, MailChimp, Boys and Girls Club, City of Atlanta, many others I know. Please welcome to the show, Blake Howard and Craig Johnson.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited. We've been looking forward to this. So one thing that I kind of want to get into right off the bat, because this is a topic that Carlos and I get asked about from time to time. How does a great brand translate into ROI, and how do you help customers and prospects kind of understand that thought process?
Well, I can jump in and take this one first, Craig. I've got a story that maybe will help articulate
Love it.
the vague idea of ROI. So maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we decided to take our kids to go see Disney on Ice. And particularly they wanted to see Elsa. I mean, that was you know, it was like in the heyday of the Frozen fanaticism. We went to the performance, we showed up, we walked into the arena, you know, they had the strobe lights going, the music playing, the fog machines roaring, and right in front of us walked a vendor holding these wands that were spinning and lighting up. And you know, of course, instantly my daughter and my son were like, we want a wand. We got to have a wand. And I'm thinking, okay, those wands maybe cost $2 on Amazon, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I flagged the vendor down, asked, hey, how much are the wands? $25 each. And, you know, all they did was essentially slap a Frozen sticker on these wands that you can get for next to nothing on Amazon. And that, I think, articulates the ROI of brand. It's essentially price premiums. You know, if you take that sticker off of the wand, it's virtually worthless. But you put that sticker on there in that experience, in that environment, and we bought 2 wands. You know, like you have to have that thing in the moment. So there's the emotional value of it. There's the experience around it. There's everything that led up to that moment to make that Frozen sticker so much more valuable than just the wand itself. And I think that little anecdote's a way to think about ROI. It ultimately comes down, in my opinion, to what's your pricing premium compared to a similar offering. And if there really is no increase or separation or differentiation, then brand is almost meaningless. You know, brand is really there to distinguish your offerings from your direct competitors. So that's one way to think about it, at least in the for-profit sector.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great story. And of course they got you for the $50, no question.
Yeah.
And I know the Frozen fever is not over as dad of a 5-year-old girl. So
No.
it's still going strong.
Well, I want to spin that question a little bit. As customers come to you today, what do you recommend them, or what is the approach to get the most ROI out of a branding engagement today?
So much of what we do is very customized to the situation, right? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? There's a lot of reasons that people come to us for branding engagements. I always say, you may be solving a problem, like things are bad and you got to like get out from underneath the bad, or is there an opportunity you're trying to capitalize on? And you may, the end result may be similar, but the way you attack those problems are very different depending on, is it an opportunity, is it a problem? Sometimes people come to us because they literally have been handed a cease and desist on their brand name because somebody else owns the trademark. So, you know what? We don't need to worry about like, should we keep the brand name or not? Like we have to change it, or otherwise we're going to court and, we don't want to fight a legal battle. Or was it a merger of 3 different companies that are coming together and they're asking the question, what are we? Should we all be together? Should we not? Should we use one of the existing names? Should we come up with a brand new name? And there's the practical like market side of that. And then there's the emotional value that these like corporations hold with it, of the brands that the companies they've built and the brands that are associated with those. And, there's an example of 2 big banks. One technically bought the other, but like, and I think it's funny because a lot of times finance folks are like, what, this branding stuff, it doesn't really matter that much. But they had written in their agreement that we're going to use this name and this logo. And it was like, that was part of their purchase agreement, And I'm like, that's partially because I think the 2 parties come into the table where like, there's so much emotional value and history that they don't want to throw away. And so every situation is really so different. And our job is to try to navigate, all right, what is the specific scenario here? What are the things that are off the table? That are the sacred cows? What are the questions they're asking? And then how can we influence the things that need to change with the brand? We've had people come to us before too and say, hey, we want to hire you, but you cannot touch the logo. You're not allowed to touch the logo, but you can do everything else, right? And then we can start diving in. We're like, that seems like a really bad decision, right? But you got to, that's where consulting comes in, right? Like, can we begin to steer the conversation and help them understand that like, you're hiring us to do a creative job, but what you're really hiring us to is help your business get to here. And so we believe that in order to do that this logo you told us is untouchable is going to be a problem in helping you get here. And can we make a good case for that? And can we move forward? So I think that's the fun part of what we do, is that there's so many different, situations that we find ourselves in. And it's our job to ultimately come back and say, how do we kind of give you back the brand that you need to get to where you want to go? Much like I often kind of say our business is like building a custom home for somebody. There's a lot of things about the business model that are very similar, but in a way, one thing that's similar to that is someone comes to you, if you're a custom home builder, and they're like, this is the home that we want to build for our family. And let me tell you about, ideally, I've never been a custom home builder, but I imagine, I've never built one either. Telling an architect, a designer, a builder, this is what's important to us in our life, and here's what we want. And then they can kind of give back to us what we, did. And sometimes it may look different than what I imagined, but it helps me kind of live the life that I want to live.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I love that perspective and color, because I feel like a lot of people, when they think about branding, they think that it's just a logo and some colors, and that's what they go and get. And then they try to, reverse engineer that into a whole language and whatnot. But I think that what you're describing really drives home that, branding, it's much more than that. Do you find that with the level of client that you're working with, like they already understand that? Or is that something that you still have to explain to them? We're not just talking about your, your logo and this, there's this whole panorama of things that we need to be thinking about.
I think it's yes and no. I think that they understand, we're not a low cost provider. So I always say people are not paying us a premium to just sit back and do whatever they tell us to do. So I think that and there's you could spend less money, right? And so we understand that there's that. And at the same time, I think there's a lot of aspects of, having done this so many times over 2 decades, you see patterns, right? And a lot of times you can say, all right, they're really wanting to go down this path, but we've been down this path before and we know what's at the end of that path. And I don't think that's what they want. So how can we help course correct? And that's where some of the education comes into play. It's rarely like, does branding matter? And it's more like, what does branding mean? And how do we get into the nuance of like what, not even just what's a logo, what does a visual identity system even mean? And what should change and what shouldn't change? And how do we think about that whole world?
I think with some of our larger clients, our enterprise level clients, brand tends to be more siloed. There's a brand team and they're relegated to think through visual identity system, maybe brand strategy, maybe brand voice. But then there's product and there's sales and there's other functions throughout the enterprise that they're like, yeah, that's fine. You can do your thing with your guidelines, but we're going to do our thing over here. And so the challenge at that level is integrating and to get people more aligned with what the right story is, how they apply that story to their segment of the business, to actually use the right colors and typefaces, that every little effort adds up to this macro consistency that's important for the organization, for the brand. So I think it depends probably on what level of client, but the enterprise level, I see them get more siloed. I think smaller startups or more like challenger brands, there's maybe more education on the value of what brand even is and how do we really leverage our brand.
Yeah. No, I think that all makes a lot of sense. I love the house analogy because we use that too. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of parallels, of course. And I think, what you were saying, Craig, it's like every situation is different and you're kind of navigating, especially if you're dealing with the higher level folks, or I know in a lot of instances, the founders or the C-level folks, and there's a lot of just emotional attachment, which is good, but kind of has to be navigated delicately. And then I think, what you all are saying too about like needing to challenge people in a healthy way. And in a sense, they're paying you for that expertise. And we get some of that too in a different context. It might be folks that are adamant they need to build out like this particular feature or whatever. And it's really emotionally driven. And we're like, well, that needs to be validated. Like, do you really want to spend on that until you know that users are really going to find value there? And I assume similarly, it's like you have an attachment to this logo, but don't let that hold you back. So yeah, I think that's been part of the reason that we're excited to talk to y'all is, very different skill sets that we're employing. But of course, there's a lot of things there that we can pick up from you all about how you navigate some of that. So changing gears, I have another question I definitely wanted to get into going into this. So a big trend that I have seen, and I am far from a branding expert, but is just kind of like, and this has been over years, but just B2B becoming a lot more brand focused. And I think adopting a lot more of the, B2C mindset, right? Which I think is really fun. And like we aspire to kind of have that same mentality. So I'm curious, you all's perspective on that shift, how you see B2B branding changing over the last few years, but then really 2024 and beyond. Like, is that trend continuing? Is that an oversimplification? Like, what else do you see going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are brands like MailChimp or Bolt that have applied B2C brand thinking and they've been super successful. So I think others are like, those types of decisions do actually matter. And I think the shift there is building a brand for the users, not just the buyers. And I think an older mindset with B2B is we have to be trustworthy. We have to present ourselves in a way that's incredibly safe, which means we've got to choose blue. We've got to have this basic geometric typeface, very safe messaging. And over time, that's just noise and it just blends in. And then you've got some people like MailChimp that are leveraging design and their communications in a way that really gets attention and creates a delightful experience overall. So I think that just the general shift of, users are individuals, they're people, they're consumers. we need to apply the same level of craft and thinking that we would as a B2C brand to a B2B brand. So I think that's a general shift that's happened, and people are maybe more willing to take risks, and they're breaking that old mantra of we just have to be super safe in all of our communications. Maybe we can actually have a little personality. So I think that's what you're starting to see.
And I think the result of it is, I've seen this over the years. You've got a B2B company that's very strong and a leader in their industry. And then some smaller competitor comes in who, and the big company has like no focus on brand at all, right? And then this smaller competitor comes in and they're very brand forward. And all of a sudden they start eating up some of that market share for and they're like, who are these little like nincompoops? Like what? They're not us. Like we're the big strong ones. Why are people believing all that? And then they're like, oh, maybe we need to adopt some of that, thinking and approach to a brand. And so again, in that one, that's their like problem to be solved. It's not the smaller one is like, there's an opportunity. We're going to go after, we're going to invest in brand and go get it. And then you got the big guy saying like, oh crap, somebody's eating our lunch we didn't expect. And it's this is not supposed to happen. How are they able to do this? And then finally they're just like, have to accept like, maybe we got to play a similar thing. And so they invest in brand more so as a problem to solve.
Yeah.
I think another part of it too, it goes back to building a brand that your employees resonate with. There's a recruiting side to a lot of it, where it's no longer just okay to have some corporate identity that it doesn't really have a lot of personality. People are out there looking for, the best situation for them as an engineer or whatever their skill set is. And they're making decisions just like consumers would make decisions in the market. And so that's where you've got to message to them. You've got to stand out with a personality. You've got to show more of your purpose and more of a meaningful story. So I think that's another maybe component to this where the battle for talent, maybe through the Great Resignation, was so profound and so clear that a lot of B2B businesses are like, okay, we've got to think about our employee value proposition and how do we build a brand that attracts the right type of, top talent. And those that have done it have been successful. So others are trying to catch up with that.
Yeah. And when I was talking about people come to us for all different reasons, we've had people come to us and say, listen, we have all the clients in the world that we need. Like that is not our challenge. We need to fill the pipeline with talent. So let's build a brand. Almost the sole reason that they're investing in it is to recruit talent.
In our business, I think selling our work in more on of a recurring basis, I guess it's easier in the sense that once the customer understands that software is a living thing that you have to maintain, otherwise it can go stale, or you can, incur in a bunch of tech debt, down the line. How does that translate to branding? Because the level of engagement you're describing and all of these intricacies like make me think that, a big brand would want to stay with you all for a while, even after you design the branding, to ensure that it is integrating correctly across all of these different departments and, that it actually addresses all of the different concerns that you're sharing.
Yeah, I love that thought. The one way I've processed that scenario is another sort of analogy or parallel. There used to be this mindset of producing blockbuster films where it was like, every 2 to 3 years you would produce the next, or maybe 5 to 10 years, the next Star Wars, and it's $50 million and it's this huge effort. It takes a long time, but then you release it and you sort of ride that wave for a long time. And a lot of people have perceived brand refreshes or brand building, brand identity exercises like that. It's something you do every 5 to 10 years, maybe. But it should be more so like how we see TV shows being produced nowadays, where there's seasons, like Stranger Things comes out on Netflix. It launches, you get a genre, you get a tone, you get characters, you get a plot. And then season 2 rolls around and it's still the same genre. It's still, mostly the same characters. Maybe you introduce a couple new characters. The plot's a little bit different, but the tone is still the same. And that's really how people should be thinking about their brand identity. They should be thinking about it evolving slowly over time. It's still the same tone, still the same meaning, still the same positioning. But, maybe like photography styles change, maybe iconography styles change, maybe illustrations, some some trend things can kind of start to evolve, and you can approach it more of a ongoing mindset where you're constantly working on it versus just waiting until things become difficult and you've got to have a huge project to go and solve the problem.
Right. That's super interesting. Something that I know it's creating a lot of confusion and fear in the marketplace right now is the topic of AI, specifically for the creative industry. So I'm wondering, have you started incorporating any of those technologies in your work? And if so, like any success outcomes that you can share?
I would say right now we're using AI tools to get started to generate some ideas. ChatGPT is helpful if you're thinking about analogies and you want to come up, you need some analogies for transformation. ChatGPT can give you 25 really quick, and that can be a starting point for ideation, whatever the challenge is. The other ways that we've been exploring it is specifically on copywriting and brand voice. So we work with organizations to define what are the guardrails of their voice. So as they grow and they scale and there's multiple writers, multiple people producing communications, how does it sound like it's coming from one source? And obviously marketers are going to use ChatGPT and other tools to create copy in a scenario like that. So can we start understanding prompt engineering enough to guide clients to think about inserting the right prompts that will produce the right consistent copy as an output? So we're starting to think about that. How do we blend brand guidelines with tools like ChatGPT?
Okay. Yeah, that's super interesting. I think that we certainly found success in that regard as well. Just building that initial context, not starting from a blank page, really quickly, like translating what the customer is saying into, something that's has a little bit more structure to it, and we can show them and they can quickly say yes or no. Because I know that, previously it would take rounds of maybe designs of mood boards and things in order to really get alignment with the client. And I feel like that is the piece where certainly AI, it's making good impact. But also, like, that's another thing that you're mentioning with, branding and how the voice, it's also important, that it's, again, when I'm thinking of branding, well, like these days I'm a little bit more educated, but still I'm not necessarily thinking about, the brand voice and actually ensuring that that's unified across the board as you have different people contributing. So I can certainly see how ChatGPT can help with that, especially with the latest iterations where you can create your own and tweak all of that.
Yeah. We have yet to see how it will impact really like brand identity fundamentals and how you create, how you evolve a logo or how you start to really think through your overall color strategy. I think, the high creative artistry side of what we do for now seems like it requires such human intelligence, that it feels strategic and separated enough from what AI can do. I'm sure at some point it could catch up, but even then it's going to be relegated to pulling from current data sets, not future data sets. So I think the more brand builders think about what's next and into the future and use that part of our brains, we will continue to stay out in front of what AI can do. But AI is certainly contributing a lot to the implementation, the activation once a brand's defined, created, built.
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet, but I envision a world in which, brand guidelines are set, and then you can basically just tell AI what you need designed. Hey, we need a new PowerPoint deck, that's focused towards XYZ, and it can just go create that for you, as opposed to having to like restart a PowerPoint deck from scratch. And then, the human looking at the brand guidelines and putting it together, but the AI could do that.
I think, again, there's a lot of parallels with our world. And going back to what you were saying, Blake, I think one of the big disconnects is folks who aren't very familiar not understanding that a lot of the skill is in like how you prompt it. If you haven't refined that and don't know how to properly guide it or like tap into relevant information, then you're definitely not going to get quality output. So like it's of course still very, very much a tool. And I think similarly, we see a lot of advantages and use it for, quickly generating code or helping, less experienced engineers like kind of get real-time feedback or mentorship. But, they still have to know what to ask for and how to piece that all together. And then of course, there still needs to be deep experience that someone is drawing from for the overall strategy and architecture decisions and how is this all pieced together and all that good stuff. So it seems like you all have a pretty similar attitude to us that like these are all tools in your tool belt to make you more efficient, but they're certainly far off from replacing the overall vision component.
Yeah.
I think it was Reid Hoffman that I heard this from, but is that, AI, the artificial part should be changed for like amplify, because it's like, it's a tool to amplify your intelligence more so than to act as its standalone thing. And I really believe that because, along the lines of what Richard is describing, I truly, I put AI already in the hands of so many people, like I'm definitely enthusiastic and early adopter. And, like quickly I see that how they are using it is just not going to get them anything very meaningful. So it really is there right now to amplify your capacity, right? And how how good you are at something. If you are really good at coding, you get the most out of AI because you know exactly how to structure your prompt. You know exactly what you're looking for, how to ask it. I bet in branding it's the same thing, just having all of your insights and experience with all of these different clients, that tool in the hands of your team, would definitely make them more dangerous.
Yeah, I listened to Mark Andreessen, who said like probably AI is not even the right term for it. And I've thought a lot about that since, because he's like, really, it's not. I kind of summarize what you were saying, Carlos, is like it amplifies our own intelligence. It's not actually intelligence. It's not, creating something that is new. It's pulling from all these different sources and then kind of giving you a summary or a conglomeration or something. And it's really good at that, but it's not actually intelligence. So like maybe AI is not the right term for it.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Sounds like it needs a rebrand, maybe, right?
I think that ship may have sailed. It's as intelligent. I thought this was a great point. He's like, it's as intelligent as your thermostat. Your thermostat has a goal. It knows how to meet it, and then once it meets it, it can celebrate the goal and stop working. Like that's intelligence. This is intelligence. Yeah.
Right. It's great to, help you think through things, to get clear, to gain alignment. But yeah, I'm right there with you. Well, AI is just one of the latest trends, but, you all have been in business for, 20 years. So whenever technological advancements, come about, how do you all decide which ones you jump in and which ones you start to integrate into your services?
I think we always just have to keep our eyes open and understand what's happening and understand like what do we need to do with this? Is this something that we need to embrace and try to do ourselves? Is this something we need to like understand is happening and move away from? I think that part of even our move into being focused on brand identity was because of the whole crowdsourcing thing that came out after we started our company. We were a graphic design firm, right? And then crowdsourcing came out, and all of a sudden people, we were literally designing brochures and business cards and things like that. And then all of a sudden people could go online and get that stuff for a fraction of a cost. So it was like, and graphic designers were getting frustrated. People aren't understanding the value of what we do. And we were like, listen, this is happening whether we like it or not. So what are we going to do? Are we going to try to like be a better commodity, or are we going to try to go the opposite direction? And that's when we said like, maybe let's build our business around not doing any of that stuff, but doing something that's more valuable. And that's a big part of what landed us, or saying we're going to build our agency around brand identity.
Yeah, and we've always had a value for pushing to get better and to find ways to improve every step of our offering, our service, our team. And I think the way that really comes to life is every every project, we want to find ways to get a little bit better. So it's not like a separate department called innovation that we fund. It's incremental innovation on every single rep that we have. Yes. And over time, it's drastically different because we've decided to implement little steps or little new technologies or whatnot. And it looks drastically different, but it's been just little integrations over time. So even like, as we started to be fully distributed remote working, we have a high value for collaboration in the work that we do. So a tool like Miro all of a sudden was very helpful, and it helped us break the monotony of a Zoom call to collaborate with clients, to have more of a workshop style that was always a part of the way we engaged with clients. So, something like that gets adopted and it supports our values, it supports what we're really all about, and we can easily kind of integrate it. And over time, little adoptions like that, I think have really, really changed what we do. But I think we are cautious to jump too much into some sort of new technology. Even like the what's happened with NFTs, there was a moment where you're like, okay, we're brand builders, we're creating unique brand assets. Shouldn't we be creating NFTs for these companies that are out there? They could have these, digitally encrypted, one of a kind brand assets. And, who knows what will happen in the future with that. But I'm glad we didn't say like, we are only an NFT branding firm now, because that would not have worked out well.
Yeah. You're definitely speaking our language there, because I do feel like we have a similar approach where with each client, we try to learn from the last client and do it better. And whenever there's trends, there's little things that we want to try, we work those into little experiments within those projects. And if it's working, then, we might use it again with another customer. That then might become template or a module or something that then we're leveraging for more and more projects. And it really has become this snowball effect where the more you do it, the more value you're able to deliver for the next client, because, what you're delivering to them in this next rep is already a lot more polished, a lot more thought out, and has a lot of those learnings built into it at the foundation level. So I definitely think for scale, that's something that's super important.
Speaking of scaling, I want to change gears a little bit. I want to go back to when we were introducing you all, two of the things I mentioned, like you've been at it 20 years, which is very impressive in and of itself. And, I alluded to this idea of like scaling services-based business. And this is something that, of course, is top of mind for us. And it's kind of a recurring theme in just some of the conversations we've been having recently. And obviously with services, there's so much there that I think we love, and that there's lots of creativity and obviously can be grown, but some of the aspects of scaling don't translate as well, right? What works when you are a 5-person team doesn't necessarily work at 10 people. It certainly won't work at 20 people. So I want to ask you all, just based on your experience, like, what does it take to scale a services-based team? How do you think about that? Is that like an explicit goal of you all's, or not so much? Like, how do you kind of think through that on your end?
Yeah, it's a great topic. And I think, a friend of mine actually just said recently, and I was like, man, he's so right. Like a services-based company like ours, you don't scale it, you grow it. And because I think that we are in a business or in an industry where, we celebrate, and rightly so, a lot of these amazing tech companies that like massive scale to what they do. And I think that, it's more of an addition type of business than a multiplication type of business. I'm not saying that there can't ever be multiplication, but it's hard to scale services with, exponentially, right? Without adding just additional people and labor. And how do you find great talent? How do you keep a team strong? I mean, I think we have seen, there's a difference between the 5-person company and the 12-person company, and we're still a small business, but we're a 25-person company now. And just the way that communication flows, the way you think about teams changes. And some people join a team of 5 because they want to work at a company that's 5 people, and then it's 12 people, and they're like, this company's become something that I don't want to be in anymore, right? And so there's the mix of all the people in the company, and Is the company moving too fast for them? Is the company moving too slow for them? What do they want out of their career? So it's this big, just kind of like, I think it's so fun. And I think that from like one of my big goals, and Blake is more on the creative side of the house. I'm more on the business side of the house. Doesn't mean Blake doesn't think a lot about business, and I don't think a lot about the brand side of the work. But generally, those are the lanes that we work in. And I just think a lot about building a great company. I just want to have a great company, and I want to have a great company that I would want to work at. That doesn't just offer me certain benefits because I happen to own it, but like if I were to come in as a 25-year-old and start working there, it would be great for 25-year-old Craig too. And I do believe that companies that are great companies will grow. So we don't want to grow to tell ourselves that we're a good company or we're a great company, but how do we be great? And if we're great, we will see that happen.
Yeah, right. You're looking at the growth as a result of the good work that you're doing and the people that you're attracting, clients you're attracting,
right,
and so forth.
Like rather than the other way around. And yeah, I mean, scale is such a loaded term too. And like, I think to your point, Craig, we're of course very growth minded and we try to grow pretty aggressively. But like, if we somehow grew by 4x over a year, like that would probably not be a great situation. Because we obviously care about the quality of our deliverables, and realistically, like that would suffer, and you have to staff up appropriately and have quality controls. So there's definitely a balance there. Yeah,
I've seen people that worked at agencies that scaled up really quickly, and they tend to also scale back down really quickly.
Right.
And we talk about like what is the right amount of growth, because I don't think we don't want to double in the next year. Like I think that would be pretty chaotic, and we'd see more turnover. And we've got such a solid team, and we want to continue to grow, and things will evolve. But I think there's a pace that we can do that allows us to continue to still, produce really great work for our clients, to have a team that gets along well and works well together and enjoys each other. It doesn't mean we're never going to be uncomfortable or things are going to always work. And sometimes things happen, a global pandemic happens and you're like, oh, we are definitely not going to grow this year. In fact, the opposite's going to happen. But you just, you have to deal with all those things as they come and just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, and I think there's different ways to grow. There's certainly headcount, but then there's also increasing your revenue or what your average price per project might be, So I think there's ways to focus on increasing your expertise and your value to the client so that you can increase overall, grow revenue overall. And I think the hardest part is in some ways growing or replicating your role as a founder. So how do I replace myself on projects? How does Craig replace himself so that we can make space for others? And I think that's the real linchpin, is starting to replicate yourself as a founder, because you just think about it a little bit differently. Maybe you have more skin in the game. You're a little bit more intense about it. And to find someone to take over that role is, those are not small shoes to fill. And then secondly, it's hard for that founder who really cares to let go and to actually empower someone to take over. So I think in our world, finding ways to develop others that can take over more responsibility so that we can have less is definitely a challenge and a part of the growth journey.
Yeah. Another thing I heard recently was someone say that a lot of times the thing that the founder is really good at ultimately becomes the same thing that inhibits the company's growth, because that founder is unable to, or unwilling or unable to let go of that. And there's different things that I'm working through right now. How do I get out of the company's way in this? And it's uncomfortable, but I think it's important.
Yeah. And I think that can a lot of times like drive growth itself, or at least the wanting to strategize about it, because something that I found, which is very true, Blake, is it's going to be impossible for us to even, any of us to clone somebody, that has all of our experience and way of thinking. But it's much easier to break that out into 4 different skills, for example, or 4 different people and departments. But then in order for you to sustain that, you have to grow to a certain level so that you can have those different roles there. And you probably want to do that too, because you wouldn't want to finally find like this person that maybe is, better than you at everything you're good at. But then, how do you keep that person? And then if you're unable to keep it and lose it, what does that mean to the business? So I think in a way, growing so that you're able to sustain the different roles that are necessary in order to, really replace you in a sustainable way long term, it's important.
Yeah. Yeah, you have one key employee leave when you're 10 people, and that's a huge impact. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you're at 50, it's a lot less. If you're at 100, it's not a big deal. So I do think there's headcount growth that allows the company to be more sustainable for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of like just chicken or the egg dynamics. I feel like when you're kind of roughly at like our size or you all's, and we're clearly navigating a lot of the same things you all are, which mostly are good problems, but it is kind of like, how do you get yourself out of the business day to day? And then, like, how do you put a little more like mid-level management in place? But then when do you justify that expense that maybe doesn't strictly translate to like billable time for client work? So it's tough. I mean, one question I have, like, and I suppose this is directed at Craig more, like I've been counseled, it's like one founder needs to find a way, is assuming there's co-founders, one needs to find a way to focus on nothing but sales, right? Mm-hmm. And like, we're not there. I would like to get there. And I think that's a very hard transition because like whether it were me or Carlos, there's so much that would be hard for us to let go of. But I'm curious how you think about that. And like, I don't know, Craig, if that's something you're moving towards, if it's a goal, or you're just, have your arms around all things business related for Matchstic. Like what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, I do focus a lot of my energy on sales, and I don't know if that's, I didn't do that because someone told us that's what an agency founder should do. That just happens to be what my more so skill set is naturally. And so I do think that, but even I think that you get to a point where if I'm the person selling, I can only get the company to here, right? And to get beyond there, I got to think about, how do I move that? Not necessarily beyond, like maybe beyond me, but like there's also what I find is, when you're a founder, you're typically like a generalist, like you can kind of do everything. I sometimes count up and I'll say, okay, well, how many people that work at Matchstic did I do their jobs? When we first started, those 7 jobs were wrapped up into my job, right? And Blake could probably say like there was 7 jobs that were wrapped up into his job, right? But I do think it's good for founders to work in what you're good at doing, and then how do you, bolt on, or how do you bring in somebody else who can handle the other things? And then eventually, as I keep taking off hats, every time you take off a hat, you grow a little bit, you can take off one of those hats, right? And typically, I think you can find somebody who's a lot better. Like, whoa, they're way better at doing that than I was, because then they can go all in and focus on that, most of the time. Because even though, I still spend a lot of my time bouncing around. I'm looking at finance, and I'm looking over here at resource management. Then I'm thinking about hiring process. Then I'm thinking about something else. So, but then you hire somebody who all they think about is finance, and it's like they can go deep in that, So, I mean, maybe it has worked for us, but I don't know if I would say that like that always has to be the case, because I think we see a lot of examples of companies where the founder, they're successful and the founder's not necessarily in one of those key roles, but what they are really good at is they're good at building a team and finding people and getting them all working together towards a common goal. So I think what's most important for Blake and I is like, can we be united in a common vision? And then how do we help get our entire team, on board for that vision? And then a lot of what's going to get us there is the rest of our super smart people, smarter than I am, going to help us figure out how do we do that? What are the nuts and bolts of getting us there?
You mentioned obviously like the dynamic between you and Blake. Naturally, one of the things I want to ask is like, you all have been together for 20 years. That's incredible. I think like Carlos and I are very lucky. I think we have a very good partnership. I think we, and I'm sure you all have seen the opposite end of the spectrum where it can, of course, be very difficult. What's made it work for you all? Do you have like 2 or 3 tips that you'd give to folks if they're going into a co-founder relationship, like thinking about whether they should bring on, a technical co-founder or whatever? Like, what do you think has kind of made it sustainable for y'all?
Well, I do think one major part is separate functions in the business. So you don't have, artistic differences, like the band broke up because of musical differences. You don't have the overlap of skills, even though, like Craig said, we very much have business conversations together or project processes or, brand point of view discussions together. So I think the separation of roles has been very helpful in that. And then secondly, Craig and I, we want the same thing out of the business. We're not trying to squeeze every penny out of it. We have a mindset of cultivating it and creating a business that is successful for us over the long term and for our team. So I think the values is aligned there. And there's also we've just been very fortunate. I think the values part, we probably knew intuitively that we were aligned there, but over the years, it's been just more and more confirmed. And maybe because Craig and I are pretty close, like we've influenced each other's individual values over time, but we're also friends. That's a big deal. Like our wives and I are, well, like Craig's wife, my wife, we're doing a double date on Saturday night. So, that's awesome. that I think that interpersonal connectedness is also a part of it, so if Craig and I aren't spending personal time connecting, I think that does lead to an environment where bitterness can creep in, or assuming the worst can creep in, so the more him and I are connected personally, the better and the more sustainable I think the partnership will be.
Yeah, and we do have certain rhythms around that. Like our jobs don't overlap a lot during the week, and so we have, we have like an intentional 30 minutes a week that we're going to connect, and then we do a quarterly double date with our spouses, and then we started doing an annual partner retreat that was our wives, and then we started doing it as families, and like I think just all of that, keeps us just so much more on the same page and connected and friends, and just like any relationship, like set the time to invest in it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think the values piece is huge, and like you hopefully have a good sense of that going into it. I mean, I feel like Carlos and I have very similar values. And then I think what also has been really beneficial for us is like same stage in life, right? So we both kind of started having kids at right around the same time. They're very close in age. So like there's a lot of just kind of, I get it. Dude, I get it. Like you kind of know where the other is at or what they're going through. And yeah, it sounds like you all have had a little bit of that too.
Yeah. What's funny is that like while we're career, in the exact same spot, family-wise, we're a little bit apart. Like my youngest child is the same age as Blake's oldest child, and so and what's kind of cool is they're become friends and buddies. But I think the role of family is the same in our lives. Like we're gonna coach the soccer team, we're gonna be at the swim meets, like we're gonna be at home for dinner. It doesn't mean like we never travel or anything, but like that's the standard, and then anything else is an exception.
Awesome. Well, I could ask you all a million more questions, but I think this is a good place for us to wrap up. So thank you all again for taking the time to join us. This was great. And thanks for sharing your wisdom and expertise. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. We'd never done this, the two of us together. So I think it was fun.
Oh, y'all nailed it. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. If you want to learn more about Matchstic, which you should, head over to matchstic.com. And it's Matchstic without a K at the end. Y'all are also on Instagram. Matchstick House is the handle, I believe. Check out Blake's podcast, A Change of Brand. And y'all let us know what you thought about today's episode. You can reach me on LinkedIn at Richard L. Simms, it's Simms.
And I am at Carlos L. Gonzalez. Thank you again for joining us on the Digital Footprint. Be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you need help with your next big tech project, whether that's validating your idea, building a new platform, or improving an existing one, head over to terrenosrealestate.com and check our Big Bite Define and Design package. It's the best way to start building a profitable product.
Definitely, definitely. You can fill out the contact form on our site or shoot either of us a message on LinkedIn and we'll get in touch. Thanks, y'all. This was great. Bye.
Thank you.